In this video, we're returning to Magic Knight Rayearth. For my second doll customization, it feels only right to make my second favourite character from the series. Clef, the Master Mage of Sephiroth. Given the complexity of his costume, it might have been more sensible to continue with Fu or Hikaru instead, and work my way up to this layered nonsense. And yet, here we are. One of the first steps for making this costume is deciding what the layers actually are. We never see more than a glimpse of the lower layers of his clothes. But there are some elements that I guessed from the manga. Like how his sleeves look like they are part of a separate garment and not part of the cloak. This is basically confirmed by the notes given to the animation team. There is first this drawing with a note about how you can't see Clef's arms when the cloak is closed. And then this drawing where not only do his sleeves peek out from the split in the side of the cloak, but there is a whole extra hem shown in front. It would make sense that the sleeves and hem are part of a single shirt or smock that he wears under the cloak. But half of the fun of making a costume is putting your own spin on it, so we can interpret this however we like. Sephiroth is also a land with a fantasy medieval European vibe, so I wonder what sort of details clothing would have if it was made in a fantasy world with both magic and space travel. I'm planning to get detailed with the construction of these garments, so the project will take me some time to complete. If I take you through every step of the process in one video, it would probably be hours long, which is why we're going to try a different format. The doll I am making will have an adult body shape rather than the child form of the Clef in canon, which will influence a slight change to the shape of some of his garments. Since all you can see of the lowest layer in the images is just the neckline itself, I had debated on making a little vestie that only had the collar on and not worrying about the sleeves. But I would like to have more options for mixing and matching with other costumes in the future, so I decided that a full shirt would make more sense. You only get a hint about what Clef's trousers look like, which gives a lot of leeway in the design. The main thing I wanted to focus on is making sure that the ankle can fit into the top of the boots, and that seems more easily accomplished with gathering it into an ankle band. Because you don't see very much of it, besides the sleeves and the hem, there is a lot of room to play with the shape and design of his shirt. I am currently waffling between ideas, so we'll both get to look forward to seeing what I finally settle on. Clef's boots most closely resemble medieval Pau Lane style boots, with a turned up toe point. It's been nearly 20 years since I've worked on a shoe project, so we'll see how they turn out. For the cloak, I am leaning towards a yoked design, which would help the overlap of the panels to lay how I want. It would also give a more stable surface for his mantle to rest on. The mantle is probably going to be one of the most difficult pieces of this project with all of the sashes, goldwork and gems, but I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. The circlet is my main deviation from Clef's standard outfit. Rather than making the one in the storyline, I have decided to make the one from the manga's epilogue, because this would be the one he would be wearing if he returned to an adult form after the end of the series. We will get started on his clothes in the next video, but let's get the doll ready to be dressed. After several coats of sealant, I started out sketching Clef's face with a purple watercolor pencil. The only purple I had was more of a pink than a purple. And then I went over those lines with purple acrylic. My line work isn't the best, but given that it was one of the very first face-ups I've done, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And my ancient Prismacolor eraser has been invaluable in correcting what mistakes I can while I learn this new skill. Once I'd gone over everything in purple, I filled in the eyelash lines with black. I then mixed up a different shade of purple and started adding more depth to the eyebrows. and once that dried, I came back with another colour. I blushed his face with a blend of pastels and browns and pinks to give his face some dimension. The shadows make his face feel more lived in. I painted a thin layer of pinkish paint on his lips to give them some colour too. I then tried to soften it by wiping most of it off, and I came back with a different shade. I went back and forth quite a few times with pastel and paint trying to get a colour I like. I'm still not entirely satisfied, but it is a learning process after all. I gave him some blue resin eyes, and I blushed the chest piece and hands of his body to match his face, and completely failed to get any footage of doing either of these things. Like I did with Umi, I made Clef's wig by wrapping my wig head in cling film and tights before coating it in several good layers of hot glue. I then dyed a combination of white alpaca fibre and some of the leftover blue fibres I had from Umi's wig to a soft lavender colour. I wasn't too precious about getting an exact colour, because Clef's hair colour varies from the different artwork and other Rayearth media. Any combination of the hues in that colour family would do, and mixing several tones seemed like a fun way to get the same colour variation that resembled the overlap of different alcohol markers. I slowly added layers of hair going up the back of the wig. For the short cropped back of the hair, I should have done the layers closer together. But I wouldn't realise that until I got to styling the wig. Once I reached the top of the head, I took some wefts and glued them together to create my parting wefts. I then cut a slit in the wig cap where I wanted the parting to be, and using a loop of wire, I threaded the ends of the parting wefts through, only to realise that my glue job on the ends wasn't nearly as neat as I thought. So I clipped off the glue and covered the ends on the inside with a fresh layer of hot glue, and jammed my wig head into the cap to shape it. I then used my mini iron to help flatten the parting so that it would lay how I like, being very careful not to melt the glue so that it came through all of the layers of hair. I then started roughly shaping the hair before wrapping a piece of wire around while I tried to decide what length made sense for his hair. The shape of Clef's hair always makes me think he once had long hair, and one day just pulled it back off of his neck and hacked it off with a single stroke of a blade. I used this thought to guide my styling. But as I cut the back shorter, I realised my mistake with the back layers. More layers closer together would have made for a smoother transition between the layers. But it felt too complicated to try and tuck more layers in without ruining the already glued hair. So I hoped that the circlet will eventually hide some of the choppiness, and just finished it as it was. And that's the doll all done! I'll share the first part of making his costume in the next video, so please come back if you want to see that.